Hello there, it's Steve here in Sydney of the Lane Craig website at truebluehealer.com. I'm going to give you a quick commentary here to give you an idea of what's in a series of free debates. One of them is in Melbourne. I'm going to talk about this particular one I've just watched. It's a 1.5 hour debate between a confirmed pseudo-skeptic, Professor Lawrence Kraus, who claims to be an astrophysicist, certainly has a reputation as being one, is heroised in Wikipedia for being a fantastic world-class astrophysicist. But that doesn't show in this debate he has with Dr. William Lane Craig. It's the third of 3 debates, we are told. 2 of them have been uploaded to the church website. It's Vimeo. There's a Brisbane debate, a Sydney debate and a Melbourne debate. Now, mysteriously, the Sydney debate has not been uploaded, and warranted speculation is that it was such a disaster for Professor Lawrence Kraus that he's had it pulled, never to be uploaded. Now, the very presentation, this bizarre presentation of a raging atheist, a skeptic, doing a debate trying to nail William Lane Craig on a Bible forum website, Melbourne church it is, it's kind of strange, and the reason he's insisting that it's not to be uploaded anywhere else is damage control. It's in case he lost the debate, and he did lose the debate seriously. So it doesn't immediately get to go all over YouTube about how serious was his loss to Dr. William Lane Craig, and that's why I'm making this video, to tell you all about it, to bring it to your notice that the pseudo-skeptics haven't improved their silly game in 20, 30, 40 years. They still make all the same silly mistakes and emotional errors. I'll just give you some examples of what astrophysicist Professor Lawrence Kraus actually does. In this debate, with his 15-minute dissertation at the beginning, William Lane Craig talks about fine-tuning being greatly appreciated by mainstream science, and in fact there are so many hundreds of these strange constants where all the numbers add up, interact with each other in incredibly fine-tuned ways, and if any one of them changes by, say, 0.5% or 1%, the universe as we know it can't exist. Certainly it wouldn't be life-supporting, you see. He brings that up. Against this, this is amazing, the much vaunted astrophysicist, Professor Kraus, says that one of the constants going to 123 places, which is so fine-tuned it can't vary by 1%, just doesn't go far enough. He adopts a tone and attitude of something like a frenetic Bart Simpson, and he says such fine-tuning just doesn't go far enough, and the proof of that is that people still get backaches sitting in computer chairs. So there. So much for the fine-tuning. Ha ha ha. Now that kind of shallowness we expect from skeptics is just sneering infantile mockery and dodging the question by coming up with a childish spat response. And we get this allegedly from a grown man claiming to be an astrophysicist. Heroised in Wikipedia he is for saying things like that. That somebody getting a backache in a chair refutes the fine-tuning of the universe, which is accepted by mainstream science, wondered about, and actually nonpluses mainstream science, because it's really God staring them in the face. And what actually happens is that later on in the debate, about 2/3 of the way through, Professor Kraus says, no, you're all wrong. You're all deluded, or you're all hallucinating, and what the fine-tuning actually means is that the 123 decimal places for one of the tuning constants actually means that there's umpteen trillion parallel multiverses, and this one that we're living in now is pure accident. So there, take that. That's basically what the astrophysics professor says. Can you believe it? It's so Bart Simpsonish, you roll up laughing. He's about the best they can offer, alongside Neil deGrasse Tyson. Both of these guys worship the Big Bang Theory, which has been utterly debunked by numerous rebel scientists who just won't go along with it, but it's still flogged on mainstream science on Discovery Channel, you see. It's all based on the redshift, which is a complete misunderstanding of heavenly bodies moving in space at all. They're not moving just because they have a redshift. It's generated by plasma. And in fact, I've got a link for you below this video showing you what actually causes the redshift. It will surprise you very much. The reason I've always stayed out of these debates between theists and atheists, because they always talk about two silly things which are false, namely evolution and the Big Bang Theory. And the Big Bang has been falsified so many different ways it's not funny. There's a link below this video to that effect. And what it means is that astrophysicist Professor Kraus is just a fairy tale teller. And what they do to keep the Big Bang Theory going, because it's been shot down so many times, is they just keep inventing new magical concepts that never occur here on Earth. So nobody can dispute them, you see. So they behave like a kind of self-appointed priesthood. And they keep inventing things like dark matter, dark energy, black holes, parallel universes, umpteen trillions of multiverses, just to avoid saying the word God. They insist that God's not possible, it's absolutely preposterous, but umpteen trillion universes is a better explanation. And then they quote Occam's razor at you, that the simplest explanation is the best one. Well, skeptics. And they preach to us about inconsistency. Ha ha ha. Kraus frenetically shouts at Craig to shout him down, to stop him getting words out of his mouth. And in one case he reveals, in support of his hysterical theory, that fine-tuning has the opposite meaning to what common sense says. He basically says, I've got a theory on an email from some eminent people, and he quotes it on a screen, a slide, and then and he starts expounding this theory, supporting the idea that fine-tuning means the opposite to what we all think. And then Dr. Lane Craig simply says, but you've cut the email in half. And down the bottom of the email, there's a refutation of what you just told us. I'm paraphrasing them all, summarising this for you, but that's basic. And Kraus is demolished. He comes out with hysterical but. I did all this to save you from all the technical stuff, which is just balderdash. He cut the first half of a theory out and pasted it into his own mouth to appear like he knew what he was talking about, because he's referring to authorities, noted researchers. Because at the bottom of the email, another noted researcher says, both of those theories crash and burn because of obvious reasons X, Y, Z, which Dr. Lane Craig knew about. Surprise, surprise, surprise. So Professor Kraus so far has scored 0-0-0 in the debate. In his 15-minute dissertation, Kraus says he's talked to a whole lot of Christians and religious people, and he takes on the concept of virgin birth, and he said he's asked a whole lot of people, and he said they privately, this is what he says, they privately say they don't really believe in it, you see, because virgin birth seems an impossibility, and that's why it's so appealing as a miracle, I would suppose. And that sounds fine. The audience goes along with that. They're all Christians in the audience, I suspect. And what happens then is, a few minutes later, Kraus is talking about in vitro fertilization, which is a triumph of modern science, you see. And you sort of think to yourself, gee, that sounds like virgin birth duplicated by science, to me. And if God was doing anything a few thousand years ago, it would have been easy to do virgin birth that way. But I'll tell you, there's an even easier way. Modern science has done more than what Kraus knows about. They've produced from female women's stem cells, they have produced male sperm cells. So it is quite possible for a woman to fertilise her own child. Okay, that's been duplicated by modern science too. So there's two different ways of virgin birth produced by modern science. So what's Kraus complaining about? It couldn't have been done a long time ago by some metaphysical being, some agency at work. It may even be occurring today. There's women claim that there's people in nunneries and all that who claim there's no natural father to their child. It may be occurring today. We just don't know. I mean, there are animals that self-fertilise, aren't there? Think about that. We may have a vestige of that in our human genome. We don't really know. Professor Kraus doesn't know either. So the objection to the virgin birth is really clobbered by modern science, of all things. What delicious irony. I bathe in this 3 times daily. In his opening 15-minute dissertation, Kraus objects to Christians using their own intellectual processes to read things critically. He talks about inconsistencies in the Bible, which Christians seem to skip over. Well, that's actually called, wait for it, we call that critical thinking, where you say, well, I won't believe that passage, but I like the next passage, and I'll forgive this chapter for having some questionable things in it, because it has some wisdom, and I'm going with it because I'm a critical thinker, and this is my life journey, sorting through all the information that comes my way, and I can give information weightings, and I can delete and reject information if I feel like it. And that's what people do on their journey through life with all information, not just holy books. Apparently this critical thinking, Professor Kraus doesn't like Christians doing this. He's saying that the Bible trips them up and discredits them all, but really it doesn't. It's an intellectual learning course for anyone who decides to wade through it. It's a lengthy project and stimulates massive growth, personal growth in the mind and intellect of the reader, which didn't happen for Professor Kraus, apparently. Alas. Professor Kraus describes his own religious convictions here when he says that Darwinism since the 19th century has replaced God, made him utterly obsolete, you see. That is a most amazing claim, since he's one of the P.Z. Myers Dawkins group that flogs neo-Darwinism, which is basically single mutations given enough time can produce all the diversity of life on Earth. News for you, Professor Kraus. Neo-Darwinism has been loudly discredited utterly by mathematicians and geneticists. The life of the universe is not long enough to do it one mutation at a time. It's on the Oxford University website. I'll provide you a link to that. Professor Kraus allows his obsession with evolution and Darwinism, eliminating God, to creep into his cosmological thinking. He actually says that trillions of multiverses clustered around this one, which is so highly tuned, prove that it's just an accident, and you don't need a God at the end of it to make it happen. Yet the chances of all that fine-tuning happening by accident is just preposterous, outrageous, beyond human comprehension. Mainstream science doesn't agree with Professor Kraus at all on this, nor Dawkins. Even Dawkins disapproves of it. It just goes so far to be ridiculous, just to avoid saying the word God. This is true hatred of a God concept, and it makes you think about autism. And how can you be so obsessively opposed to a simple intellectual concept? What's your problem? And having just made the ridiculous claim that fine-tuning really means the opposite to what common sense tells you, there's a designer. It actually means the opposite. There's umpteen trillion multiverses instead, and this one's just an accident, so we don't have to say the word God. Having said that, for which there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever, he then peppers Dr. Lane Craig with, how do you know that? Where's your evidence? How do you know this? What's your evidence for that? How can you believe this? How can you believe that? What kind of non-evidence-based belief is that, Dr. Craig? That's in the video. It will truly amaze you. After that dissertation on "You're all confused and I know better," it is truly amazing to hear such hypocrisy. He seems to be unaware of it, like so many pseudo-skeptics are, unaware of how they appear in terms of their position, how self-defeating they are in their emotional outbursts. In his opening dissertation, Dr. Kraus comes up with the thing about bereaved people claim to hear voices of deceased people. Our grandfather finally died, and a few weeks after the death of the grandfather, you know he's definitely dead, yet you hear his voice in the middle of the night. When you wake in the morning, he's talking to you in your head. It'll happen for a few weeks and then it fades away, you see. Dr. Kraus says that's simply an hallucination. You're hearing what you want to hear, what you need to hear. Your own mind is being chemically kind to you and telling you what you need to hear. To which William Lane Craig says, I'm paraphrasing him to boost this, William Lane Craig says to that, but Professor Kraus, that also applies to your own cosmological theories. They're just things you want to be true, begging to be true, waiting to be true. So the idea that everyone else is hallucinating applies to your good self also. Now that's another example of skeptics not having the empathy to realise that a position they put forward is self-defeating and destroys their own position. Foot shooting is a very common thing in pseudo-skeptics. We find this. So they're not able to connect their own thoughts together like a narrative like average normal people do. Here's a 15-minute opening dissertation. He's railing against Christianity and its teachings. He talks about the resurrection of Jesus, you see. And he talks about there's absolutely no scientific evidence of resurrection whatsoever. So why should anyone believe it? I mean, you know, he reckons he's talked to Christians who have doubts about it. It just seems so preposterous. At first sight, you might agree with that. It does seem preposterous. Except, evidence of afterlife is actually very great. There's TV channels about it. Specifically a television show called Psychic Detectives. And there's a narrative of all the stories where something like 60 cases of murder have been solved by gifted psychic mediums contacting the murdered person, who describes their murderer by name and description details. And from this information provided by a gifted psychic medium, more than 60 cases, police have endorsed the medium, saying the medium made it possible for us to score a conviction and give long, harsh sentences to murderers. Okay, I'll give you a link for that below this video. So the argument that Kraus actually said there's no evidence that would satisfy any court of law. Well, there's 60 of them. 60 cases at least in one Psychic Detectives show. Now, there's other life, a physical reappearance. There's only about 6 people in the world can do this, and it happens almost daily in Sydney. Physical mediumship, ectoplasm coming from the body of a very rare physical medium, such as David Thompson, assumes the shape of a deceased relative and is recognised by a random person in the audience of about 25-30 people. Okay, they appear for about 15 minutes. They walk around. They are recognised by voice, odour, touch, descriptions of intimate details that are not written down anywhere. You can't get them off Facebook. That physical mediumship, reappearance of a deceased person in physical reality, occurs just about every day of the week in Sydney. Okay? See David Thompson. Get Victor Zamet's weekly email service about afterlife evidence. It is massive, and the skeptics are trying to bury it all the time. I'm intrigued to know why they haven't taken on the police. because the police are the best true skeptics going, and pseudo-skeptics won't take them on. That seems to be what's happening there. A very serious thought and attitudinal mistake, a social mistake, cuts right to the core, revealing the main mistake made by these pseudo-skeptics. They want to shut everybody up by telling them there is no evidence. Full stop. Periods, as the Americans say. There is no evidence. They want to tell everybody that. There is no evidence. But that's an incredibly naive thing that you only get from the mind of a child living in the body of an adult, which is what all the pseudo-skeptics do seem to be, including much vaunted astrophysicist Professor Lawrence Krausses. Because what you should be adding at the end of it, to be polite, knowing how much scientific literature there is on the planet, thousands of tons of it, and you can't read it all, you never can, nobody can, is when you say there is no evidence, you've got to add, in my humble opinion, IMHO, because there's always somebody sitting somewhere with the evidence to put in your face. Now, even if that happens, skeptics pretend not to see it. They pretend evidence blindness, okay? So that is very narcissistic and very infantile, and the arrogance is remarkable when they say there is no evidence, because you can question them. Well, how many tons of science literature did you read? How many tons weight? There's 150 years, there's libraries of evidence of afterlife, for example. And you can have one consistent line. You can say it's all fraud, 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 fraud. But then that shows your mindset. It shows your inability to read evidence. And thus, actually, in fact, skeptics are disqualified automatically from reading evidence because they are willfully evidence blind, as far as I can tell, and as far as many skeptic observers can tell. They've been studied very carefully. I've made 200 videos about skeptics and spoken to thousands of them, all identikit copies of Lawrence Krausses. They all say the same things. There is no evidence. There is no evidence of this. There's no evidence of that. And you just say, well, how many tons of scientific literature did you comb through before you made that statement? To which you normally get silence. Okay, so Professor Lawrence Krausses is doing the same thing there. There is no evidence of resurrection. But in fact, there's lots of evidence, and it's going on, and you can witness it, you can be part of it. People do physically return from the dead in physical mediumship seances, 25, 30, 40 people per day, in about 3 or 4 places in the world. It's happening: Britain, Switzerland, south of France, Sydney. Okay? So you just can't say there is no evidence. There's verifiable evidence, verified by strangers, sitters in the room, okay, who recognise who is forming out of ectoplasm. Remarkable and astonishing and almost sickening sometimes. It looks so strange, yet I've been there, and it soon grows to be part of you. And no magician has ever duplicated this on stage. Okay? No one's been able to make, no magician ever has been able to get someone up on stage and make a deceased relative appear in front of them, and they say, oh, that's my granddad. No one's ever been able to do it. Okay? And have the audience see it too. So, it hasn't been falsified by magicians. Okay? And a thing quite noteworthy was Professor Kraus kept making gay analogies, gay metaphors, gay syllogisms, gay accusations against Dr. William Lane Craig. Now, an astrophysicist with an entire universe to talk about talks about gay issues. Isn't that astonishing? Don't you think that it's an amazing choice of subject in the middle of a scientific debate about fine-tuning of the universe? And it's truly amazing, isn't it? And it turns out to be, he doesn't really care so much about the universe. He cares about bashing Christianity, head-kicking Christians, especially this leading Christian, Dr. William Lane Craig. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being gay. I'll register that with you right now. Nothing wrong with being gay. But psychopathically head-kicking people online and in these videos, these debates, that is psychopathic behaviour, okay? That's not okay. Now, it looks to me like the motivation of a whole lot of pseudo-skeptics is that they are gay, they are angry, and that's okay by me. I'm not condemning them for being gay at all. But they want to get back into Christianity, they want to get clauses removed from the Old Testament, and I will say, well, it's not a problem, just don't read the Old Testament, ignore it, pretend it's not there. But obviously they're not true atheists, because they still want back into the religion somehow. And because they can't get back in because of these a few lines of text in an old book written thousands of years ago, they go merrily head-kicking Christians all over the internet, okay? So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is get your own religion of atheism, and that's been identified by numerous observers, that atheism and atheism plus is an alternative religion to Christianity, and that's okay. You can do that too. And now we are seeing, amazingly, the atheist plus movement, the skeptic movement, has been infiltrated by a few feminists, and the strange mix of feminism and gayness seems to be causing the whole movement to implode. They're tearing each other apart. We've got PZ Myers accusing Michael Shermer of rape or something, and he's another gay himself as far as I can tell. Certainly he's a gay rights supporter, a very energetic one is Michael Shermer. So is PZ, so is Lawrence as far as I can tell. So gay issues seem to be the underlying motivation of much of the pseudo-skeptic movement. Not all of it, not all of it. But I'm glad it's in America and not here. America, you're welcome to this product of your Bible Belt. We just laugh at it from over here in Sydney. Okay. Can I just say one more thing about Professor Kraus? He's almost trying to persuade William Lane Craig to let him back into Christianity. And I'll tell you what Professor Kraus actually says. Having made to illustrate a syllogism, he went on about, you can say that all mammals are gay, all mammals are homosexual, and therefore that leads to a false conclusion at the next step, you see. But then he seriously said, not a figure of speech, he said, it's a well-known fact that 10% of all sheep are homosexual. Therefore it's natural and okay. And it's almost like he's trying to buy himself, trying to reason himself, trying to convince a leader of the Christian movement that he wants back in, and he just wants a line crossed out in the Old Testament because of 10% of sheep being gay. Now, what do you think William Lane Craig's response to this was? Well, it was an embarrassed giggle, and he said sort of words to the effect, do you really want me to answer that? You can't be serious. You don't want an answer to that question, that 10% of sheep are gay, therefore it's natural. Seriously? The question wasn't answered. The question wasn't answered. But doesn't that really show what this astrophysicist is really talking about? Nothing to do with the universe or science. It's a need to belong in a religious organisation. I don't know. And this powerful need to belong to a religious organisation, to function in it some way, to be a member of it, is actually endorsed by Richard Dawkins, who says in a BBC Horizon documentary, he absolutely agrees that there has never been an atheist society in the history of mankind. And from that, Richard Dawkins teaches us, and I must agree with it, that obviously religious practices, religious tendencies, are genetically installed in us by the strange agency of evolution. So it must add to our survivability somehow, most likely. So So we can't blame the poor skeptic for wanting to belong to a religious organisation. It's part of his brain structure. So I think we can throw all the astrophysics out and all the fine-tuning arguments and just look at the suffering of these people. It is great, don't you think? Vaunted astrophysicist, Professor Kraus, says that one of the constants going to 123 places, which is so fine-tuned it can't vary by 1%, just doesn't go far enough. He adopts a tone and attitude of something like a frenetic Bart Simpson, and he says such fine-tuning just doesn't go far enough, and the proof of that is that people still get backaches sitting in computer chairs. So there. So much for the fine-tuning. Ha ha ha. Now that kind of shallowness we expect from skeptics is just sneering infantile mockery as it does. In this debate, with his 15-minute dissertation at the beginning, William Lane Craig talks about fine-tuning being greatly appreciated by mainstream science. And in fact there are so many hundreds of these strange constants where all the numbers add up, interact with each other in incredibly fine-tuned ways, and if any one of them changes by say 0.5% or 1%, the universe as we know it can't exist. Certainly it wouldn't be life-supporting, you see. He brings that up. Against this, this is amazing. The much heard of 3 debates, we are told. 2 of them have been uploaded to the church website. It's Vimeo. There's a Brisbane debate, a Sydney debate and a Melbourne debate. Now mysteriously the Sydney debate has not been uploaded, and warranted speculation is that it was such a disaster for Professor Lawrence Kraus that he's had it pulled, never to be uploaded. Now the very presentation, this bizarre presentation of a raging atheist, a skeptic, doing a debate trying to nail William Lane Craig on a Bible forum website, Melbourne church it is. Hello there, it's Steve here in Sydney of the Lane Craig website at truebluehealer.com. I'm going to give you a quick commentary here to give you an idea of what's in a series of 3 debates. One of them is in Melbourne. I'm going to talk about this particular one I've just watched. It's a 1.5-hour debate between a confirmed pseudo-skeptic, Professor Lawrence Kraus, who claims to be an astrophysicist, certainly has a reputation as being one, is heroised in Wikipedia for being a fantastic world-class astrophysicist. But that doesn't show in this debate he has with Dr. William Lane Craig. It's the third, kind of strange, and the reason he's insisting that it's not to be uploaded anywhere else is damage control. It's in case he lost the debate, and he did lose the debate seriously. So it doesn't immediately get to go all over YouTube about how serious was his loss to Dr. William Lane Craig, and that's why I'm making this video, to tell you all about it, to bring it to your notice that the pseudo-skeptics haven't improved their silly game in 20, 30, 40 years. They still make all the same silly mistakes and emotional errors. I'll just give you some examples of what astrophysicist Professor Lawrence Kraus actually